So we're already at week 5, and this week we're going to be working on prototyping and accessibility. Ooh, okay, yeah. So here's the attendance form. I'm just going to give you guys like a minute to copy that. Okay. Um, we'll have the secret word at the end. So upcoming is your midterm. That's going to be the assignment that you guys are going to be working on. So the project is to create a project about a local restaurant. So for the midterm, we want to see a project through from start to finish, following one of the 4-step prompts. And there'll be more information about this on the Figma website as well. So feel free to go to that Notion and go over all the instructions about what's expected for this project for you guys. And why we're asking for local restaurants is we want you guys to present some personal familiarity. So select a business that you and people you know have been to, and then you can conduct user research through analyzing both your own experiences and those of your friends and families. So I'm pretty sure, like for example, I did Top Dog when I took the Figma class, and like I went and I like asked questions to the top dog guys and asked people around me for their. Oh, sorry. Hello? Okay. Yeah, so it's like really easy for you guys to go and conduct user research and make sure that your design decisions are going to be grounded in some data that'll be easy for you guys to collect. Tangibility, a lot of design is hypothetical, so by picking a real establishment, one that you guys personally care about, you can more easily visualize the real world problems and develop tangible solutions. And then community, restaurants inherently create culture by providing space. So as you design, you get to consider both the physical location, so like Berkeley, and the staff of the restaurant, as well as the community that encompasses. And you guys are the community that one of these local restaurant encompasses. So it'll just be much easier for you guys to understand the product that you're creating. And yeah, so prompt visual design, branding. So you are going to redesign the restaurant's branding and create one marketing illustration. So one, you would have to examine existing branding. So going to their website or an app that they have and seeing what already exists. You're going to redesign the branding system, create one marketing illustration like a menu or a poster, and then make sure you use pen tool and vector networks. Another option is to create an illustration. So you can create 3 illustrations inspired by the restaurant. You're going to have to, again, examine the restaurant's visual identity, create 3 illustrations inspired by it, and the minimum dimensions should be Figma's A4 size. So remember when we are talking about frames, they already provide you guys with um, file sizes. So go ahead and click the A4 size when you start working, and then use the pen tool and vector networks. And then the third option is to redesign the restaurant's existing website. So examine the restaurant's existing website, create 3 to 4 screens showing low, mid, and high fidelity wireframes. So remember when we were doing like the Spotify work, you had to have like low, mid, and hi-fi wireframes. Again, you're going to be doing that for this if you choose the web option. And then your screen should be desktop/web dimensions. Again, that's in the frame options. And you're going to be using components and variants. Or you can do mobile, so design a delivery app specific to the restaurant. So it's not going to be redesigning like Uber Eats or something, but you're creating a delivery app that is specific and geared towards the restaurant. Oh, and to Coco, yeah, I we're just going to go over the slides in meeting, and then I'll send out the link to the slides afterwards. And for the mobile one, so again, creating 3 to 4 screens showing low, mid, and high fidelity wireframes, and your screen should be phone screen dimensions. And again, the focus is using components and variants. So for the UI UX prompts, your focus is using components and variants. So you should have you're going to be building components and using them throughout your design. Whereas for the visual design focus, you're using pen tool and vector networks. So you guys can choose whatever you feel stronger with, and then focus on that for the midterm. Can you do a redesign of the website but do the mobile version? Um, we're gonna ask you guys to stick to the prompts, but like let's say that the website is missing like delivery app function, that's what you would design. This is just low-key easier for, we want to keep it consistent for like grading and everything. So we're going to ask you guys to stick with one of these four prompts. And then within those four prompts, you have like creative freedom. But yeah, if you have further questions about that, you can message me or Ashley. And yeah, so they're open and there's also an open-ended option. So actually, if you'd like, you could submit your own project proposal, and your proposal would need to be 250 words max and just include a brief but clear overview of your intended project, a set of requirements similar to what we've outlined, and whether you'll be using pen tool or components in your project. So this due date is wrong, so you need to submit this by this Friday. So I believe that would be the 25th. So by the 25th, you would need to submit by email to me or Ashley a proposal. So if let's say if you want to do a website redesign but in app, then you would have to like describe exactly what you'd want to do and whether you'll be using pen tool or components and let us know. So submission, it should say on Canvas what the due date is, and what you'll be submitting is a Figma file. So this should encompass your entire process, not just the final product. And the final product should be clearly indicated. So you include a link to the file as a part of the write-up. So within a write-up, you're gonna submit a PDF with the file link included. This is the Figma file. And in the write-up, 300 words max, describe the restaurant, why you selected it, your design process, research and challenges, and an overview of your final project design. So just letting us know why you chose this restaurant, what you hope to like fix in your redesign, and then just your design process throughout. And don't worry about like, I don't know, writing perfectly or anything. It's just 300 words. And we just want to have something to help us understand what your redesign was meant to be. And yeah, if you have any further questions about this, please feel free to message us or we can talk more about it at the end of the lecture. So you guys also have a slip day, or if you guys have DSP, you guys can let us know. And you receive one slip day. So this is 24 additional hours to submit either the midterm or the final project with penalties. So we'll automatically apply the slip day where it best impacts your grades. So like the final is weighted more than the midterm. So if you guys use the slip day for your both, then we'll probably only apply it to the final, for example. But if you find that you need an extension on a project for personal reasons, please let us know before by the Wednesday before the project deadline, and then contact us via email, not Slack, if you have any DSP accommodations, and we'll be sure to apply them or a similar accommodation. Also, if you guys need an extension, we're going to be moving that away from Slack, and we're going to be having you guys email us instead, just because it's getting a bit hard to keep up with it on Slack. Chat, this is a link for more midterm information. There's a whole breakdown and of more information about every single prompt that you're able to choose. So if you guys want to follow this link, it's also on the Figma Notion page under the midterm section. So yeah, I'll just give you guys like a second. Are there any questions about this right now that you guys would like answered? Okay, then we'll just move on. So design accessibility, we're going to be talking about that today. So accessibility is the concept of ensuring that products and experiences can be accessed by everyone, regardless of their abilities. So accessibility within design involves considering the needs of people with disabilities. And disabilities are often defined in these two ways. So as a physical or mental impairment that limits one's ability to do certain activities, or the inability of an environment to accommodate for one's needs. So, as we observe these two definitions, it is helpful to think of disability as not a permanent condition, but as resulting from many different factors. So, this persona chart, for example, on the right, depicts many different types of persons with mismatched needs to their environment. Some, like a person with one arm, are permanent, while other mismatches are situational, like a person with a heavy accent in a country foreign to them, are situational. So, disability equals a mismatch between a person and their environment. And we're sort of working to shift that language. So, language is flexible. It shifts and changes with cultural norms, and even the most well-intentioned phrases can later be realized as negatives. Take, for example, the term hearing impaired. This implies damage to a person's hearing, and the phrase focuses on impairment as not the norm and ties a person to their impairment. Over time, the terms D or deaf or hard of hearing have become more accepted. So, accessibilities of design. There's usable design functions as intended, is easy and intuitive to use. Accessible design accommodates for the needs of a group of people, and inclusive design includes and applies to as many people as possible. So, this little triangle is like what most designers are always constantly trying to achieve to ensure that their designs are accessible to as large a group of people as possible. And accessibilities in visual design. So, for example, image descriptions. There's always going to be text descriptions of an image, or text should be concise yet descriptive enough for users to understand context of the image, or color contrast. So the text in the background is on need to meet high enough levels of contrast to be discernible. Sorry, one sec, let me go. Or captioning. So you can see this on like YouTube. Closed captioning transcribes audio into text, and users that are hard of hearing might use captioning to read alongside a visual program. And then color contrast is important to consider in design, as people who have low vision or a form of color vision deficiency might view the information being displayed differently. So, for example, the BART map, as well as most transportation maps, is color coded by transportation route. And then without any color, it becomes difficult to distinguish between the routes. You would have to like look really close and look at the names and everything. And that's not like a very easy way to discern the information that's being presented to you, right? This is just examples of like different visual impairments and how that results in looking at like a map like this. And here are some examples of accessible, inclusive design. So tactile paving, it's like, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but like distinct and often bumpy paving, often found at transit stations to warn users of the platform edge. Curb cuts. This began in Berkeley through the efforts of Ed Roberts and other disability right activists. Text to speech, speech to text. So translations from one method to another are helpful for users to use a text to speech program to vocalize their thoughts. And then revisiting the design pyramid. So we always want to be in the middle of that design pyramid, right? Making sure it's usable, inclusive, and accessible in everything that we're designing. And universal design exists as a sort of culmination of the principles championed by usable, accessible, and inclusive design. And it's a design that encompasses the needs of the users to the greatest ability without the need for extra accommodations. And for example, OXO Good Grips vegetable peeler. So if you cook or bake, you most likely have used a vegetable peeler at some point in your life, and perhaps the more efficient to use peelers have grippy or indented handles for you to hold on to. And the peelers with handles were invented in response to the needs of people with arthritis to provide needed grip support. So it's little subtle changes that really allow more people to use a product. Any questions about accessible design or any sort of really cool innovations that you guys have ever noticed? Okay. We're going to be going into basic prototyping, which will be really useful for your midterm. So what is prototyping? Prototyping is the process of turning design concepts into tangible forms, and these forms, digital or physical, can be tested to reveal insights. And then within the context of Figma and other prototyping tools, prototyping allows designers to demonstrate how interfaces will behave and account for how users will interact with interfaces. So remembering fidelity, with low fidelity, the general concept and layout of a design is tested, and then prototyping comes in during mid fidelity, and it's used to observe user interaction with and test organization of an interface. And then high fidelity prototyping is used to elevate your design. So prototyping is essentially forming connections between two objects within a frame. So it allows designers to define what happens when a user interacts with A and how A gets to B. So it's kind of emulating what it looks like if you were to actually like code out a design that you build, and you're getting to simulate that within your design using prototyping. So think of frames in a prototype as instances, and then take the screenshot of an old teacher feast cat Instagram page, for example. So each interaction with the page results in a different instance. So from main page to clicking on a post, you see that first interaction from the most left photo to the middle photo. Clicking the photo takes you to a new page, right? And then clicking on the comment button takes you to a comment page. And that's sort of what prototyping does in Figma. So there can be multiple connections made from one object or frame, as long as each interaction has a different trigger. So we'll cover this in a bit, but there can be multiple interactions made with different objects in the same frame. So if we were to go back to this page, for example, like the share button and the comment button are on the same page, but they can be given different interactions with different trigger points. So, for example, let's take a look at Instagram's saved collection feature as an example of multiple interaction with one object within a frame. So on the leftmost starting frame, there are two possible interactions. So users can tap on the save icon to save a post, and then alternatively, they can press and hold on the save icon to save a post to a specific collection. So the same thing can also have two different triggers. And you do all of this within the prototype panel, which is in your design panel on the right. So to enter prototyping mode on Figma, you can navigate to the prototype tab on the right sidebar. And when you are in prototype panel with nothing selected, it should look like this. And then when you are in prototype mode, you will only have access to prototyping tools. To access design tools, you simply have to switch back to the design panel. And then to view the results of your prototyping, you can click on the triangle or the present button. So device settings, Figma offers many options to choose from in terms of devices, and devices determine how your prototype will display when you present it. So as you can see, they're choosing like a phone, and that's when they click play, as we talked about here in the prototype tab, that's how they're going to view whatever their design is. And you can also choose to not use a preset device size, and we actually present our slides without any selected device or prototyping. So here's just an example of how the frame sizing works when you're in prototyping. And then building connections. So to add a prototype interaction, select an object while in prototype mode. This is really important to keep in mind. You'll only get this option when you're in prototype mode. A blue plus sign or node should appear on the object as whenever you hover above it, and then you click and drag the node or hotspot to another object to make a connection. You can also add an interaction using the plus in the interactions panel. So right here, you guys can see that there's a plus button. If you click on this object and you click interactions, that itself will also give you the option to create connection. So here are the components of a prototyping interaction. So there's triggers, which determine which user interaction will result in which prototype responses. So whether that's clicking the object or dragging the object, hovering, pressing, all these options. And then once you click that, actions is the next option. So this is the reaction when triggers are activated. So do you want to navigate to a new page, or do you want to open an overlay on the frame? And they decide what happens after a trigger. And then animations determines how the prototype moves from one frame to another. So Figma has developed a lot probably from these screenshots, and there's really cool options now as well. So you can make it instant, you can make it dissolve, which is a lot more seamless, or smart animate, which will sort of analyze whatever your object is and what the ending result you want it to be, and sort of animate a certain like animation that will really like fit the design that you're working on. And then interaction details. Once you've made a connection between two frames, you can edit the interaction between them in the interaction details panel. So this is where you can customize the triggers, the actions, or the animations of the interaction. So here are all the available options. Here's a little animation of things you could do with the prototyping. So you see they're clicking, and then it's like probably they use Smart Animate, and it's transforming into this. And it's also going back. Any questions so far on prototyping? You can also type them in the chat. Prototyping functions. So what can I do with prototyping tools? There's really a lot that you guys can do, and by making some simple connections with the prototyping mode, you can make functional buttons, navigate between frames, and create basic animations. And this week will mainly cover basic prototyping tools and functions, and in the future we'll go into more detail about advanced prototyping functions. So I know, like, at least when I'm doing my designs, when I first started using Figma, I was like really impressed by this feature, especially. Um, I mean, it literally looks like you've coded something when you are using the prototyping function. And I feel like that's really cool for just having like designed a couple boxes and things like that. But yeah. And here's an example with like the Spotify interface. So here the person who created the slides has prototyped interactions between a playlist thumbnail in the Spotify search results and the playlist main page. So you can see that here they're making this object have a trigger point when clicked that takes you to this new page, right? And the resulting prototype animation is the screen sliding to the right. So you see here where the animation they selected is slide in. That's why it's coming in like this, right? And it's very cool. So some prototyping examples with components. So when you're creating a component, you can also, like we talked about how it always sits in your assets, right? You can prototype those so that whenever you're copy and pasting or like dragging those into whatever your file needs, you can always have options like buttons, and these buttons will just always turn green when clicked and gray when clicked again, right? Or swiping blocks away. So this is a really cool thing, and you guys can have consistency with your prototyping as well. Actions and animations. So while triggers are more self-explanatory, actions and animations require more nuance to explain. And you'll be exploring these both in lab, but for now we can cover some examples. And recall that actions are reactions to triggers and determine what happened during an interaction. So animations determine how the action is played out. So for example, we have open overlay and the workspace frames and interaction details panel for an open overlay action. And the overlay is housed in a different frame and is pulled into overlay the original frame. So the resulting animation is kind of like what we're seeing on the right. And this function is typically used for sidebars, pop-ups, menu functions, and interface prototyping. We have navigate to. This is probably one of the more common ones that you'll probably be using when you're prototyping. And this means that upon triggering, it will move from one form to another. And this function is helpful for switching between different frames or instances in a prototype. So for example, like let's say you choose to design a website, right? You want like this is the sort of action that you're going to want when you're moving between different pages of the prototype, the website design. In general, Figma animations can follow the movement or look of one of the options shown above, and the trajectory of these animations can be edited by customizing easing curves. So these are all different options of like the way you want it to look when you are um, animating and triggering these sort of actions. And you guys are feel free to like better understand this with just a little bit of like practice and a little testing on your own. Here are some examples of easing curves. So the first example is a linear ease, right? And you can edit this to be an ease in and out, for example, just by moving around where how the function sort of moves on the graph. And this is an option when you are clicking an interaction, when you're creating an interaction. And these are more examples of how it could look and sort of the resulting action in the animation. And many connections. So prototyping many interactions on the same interface can quickly get complicated. And in the screenshot, they're showing how this in progress prototyping for an interface you might remember from a previous lecture. Although this the really does look very it doesn't look complete. It already looks quite messy, right? So there's also layer organization. So it's good to and very helpful practice to have a system of organizing your layers. In the first image on the left, you see that the layers are messy and therefore it's difficult to differentiate between frames. But in the second image is actually the layer organization of the slides for this lesson. So you see how it's like it goes numerically and by section. So that whenever you're looking for something, you already know how to find it. And that way, whenever you're prototyping or anything like that, you don't get all these like lines mixed up and sort of like overlapping each other and hard to fix. And make sure you're using components and their variants. So this is good organization within the components that you use is also great practice. So the workspace shown to the left has layer components organized by 16px and 32, as well as by their placement in the prototype. So make sure you utilize all these organizational tricks. And it's a good habit to get into early on so that later when you're working on more complex things, if you guys, let's say, continue down like a product design route, you know like how to keep your workspace clean. And multiple flows. So while prototyping in Figma, you can create multiple flows for your prototype in one page to preview different user journeys in your design. By definition, a flow is a path users take through a series of connected frames. And in contrast, a prototype is a collection of these flows. So multiple flows have different starting points, which can be useful for iterating or deciding between designs, also known as A/B testing, as we talked about earlier on in the semester. Yeah. And creating flows. So creating a connection between two frames automatically creates a starting point for a new flow. And you can create multiple flows using the same frames by adding starting points. And then to add a starting point, you can do one of the following. You can select the starting frame, then click in the flow starting point section of the right sidebar. Again, your design panel. And you select and right click the starting frame and then click add starting point. And then you can duplicate a frame with an existing starting point. So this is also another way, like whenever you click on this like flow, you're immediately getting like almost like a pop-up of what your prototype is going to look like, which is really helpful. And then multiple defined flows allow you to isolate different parts of your UI for efficient user testing and feedback. And naming flows. So flow names and descriptions can be edited in the right sidebar under the prototype tab. So in presentation mode, you can toggle between each different flow on the same page, and each flow's description is also shown, which is really useful to provide prompts to participants for usability tests, documentation, or provide additional context. And yeah, so just wrapping up, we're going to talk about the announcements. So homework 5 is just working on the midterm. So this week and next week, there are no homework assignments so that you guys can focus on your midterm. And please use your time wisely. We know midterm season is rough, and this project is your first chance to basically do anything you want. So go wide and go deep with your ideas and approaches. I know I like started early on with my midterm, and I didn't finish until um the sort of the due date. So I would really recommend at least like doing a little bit every day with your midterm. You're not writing up a proposal, you're doing the entire midterm. Is that your question? Okay. Yeah. You're only writing up a proposal if you don't want to do one of these four. So these are the four prompts that we've given. The proposal option is if you want to come up with your own project idea that allows you to work on either components or pen tools. And we also can't guarantee that your proposal will be accepted. But if feel really passionate about doing something else that, like for example, what you had mentioned, then you should go ahead and submit that. The proposal is due Friday if you want to submit a proposal, but the midterm itself, if you want to do one of these four options, so like visual design with branding or UI UX web for the restaurant redesign, if you want to just do those and you don't want to come up with a different idea, then that's going to be due next week. So you have 2 weeks. Okay, yeah. And then lab 5 this week, you're just going to be practicing basic prototyping and you'll be following along with your TAs.